So in the interest of everybody's time, I'll go ahead and get started. Just so you guys know, my name is James Knowles. I'm the city administrator here in the city of Dardenne Prairie. If you haven't met me before, you'll see on the screens here the agenda for the evening. One of the members already told me that that was not connected to the invite that went out. We were using some new technology both to do the polling and then the scheduling. So that should have went out with your schedule, but I don't know that it did. So it's a pretty simple agenda this evening. We'll get started here in just a second. We'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Obviously, we'll do a quick roll call and introduce ourselves to each other. And then I'll go over very briefly and very quickly the original staff memo that was sort of the request from staff to begin this process and why we're here today. And then from there, I don't want to be the one that presides over meetings. One of you will preside over the meetings. And this is someone just to preside over and facilitate the meetings. We'll elect a chairperson of the steering committee. And then we'll move on very quickly to Andy Struckoff from PGAV, which is a consulting company that we've used for many years to do some of our technical work and our consulting and facilitation work on our comprehensive plan for our zoning and land uses. Obviously, this ties very closely into that. PGAV, I'll tell you about them in a minute, has got a tremendous history on helping facilitate groups like this and bringing their expertise into making sure that there's a good work product that comes out of this to help guide the city on future developments. At that point, I think the Board of Aldermen is looking for direction from you, since this is your committee, as to how we would like to move forward on any engagement of somebody. I think we all, from the board's perspective, realize that you're going to need both technical assistance and probably some facilitation help. We'd like to make sure that we'd like to have you endorse either PGAV or another plan if you've got one. And then we're going to get out of here because we're not going to be here too late. This is our first meeting. We do want to keep these concise and be appreciative of your time. But we also want to make sure that we just get some information from you so that we can have an idea what our homework is, or probably my homework is going forward. Again, to help make these as effective for you as possible. So with that, if you want to all stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll go around the room real quick. Mark Hunter. Here. EJ Sansone. Mike Coslow. Here. John Ledoux. Present. Oh, I don't know if they told you. I keep calling you Chris Ledoux. I don't know. I know your name's John, but I want to call you the country singer's name. David Hoskins. Carl Moss. Yeah. Debbie Haley. Wendy Rackavan. Cliff Branch. Here. Mike Woolridge. Was there Jack Valentine or Jack Ballantyne? I'm sorry. Yeah. Jack. Okay. Missed anybody, right? I got everybody. All right. So just very briefly, I'll go ahead and put this on the screen for you so you can see it. Back in February, I had asked the city, the Board of Aldermen, to start a process where we could have a turn that off. I apologize. With all of the conversation that we've been having from an economic development perspective on the properties and the areas along Technology, Post Road, Town Square, and then that area at Mers Farm, which is the property just across the street from the Town Square Schnucks and Target and Pub and Grub. There has been a lot of activity in trying to sell that property to a developer. There's also been people who continue to contact the city about what the city would like to see there. Now, that property has a zoning designation, but zoning designations are oftentimes much more broad and doesn't necessarily indicate specifically what the vision is for development along that corridor. In order for us to really work with a development company or any kind of developer or any other organization on getting those properties sold and developed in a cohesive manner that is both something that's what the citizens want, but also meets the needs of the city. And those could be meeting the needs of the city's financial needs, maybe supporting other developments throughout the area, such as Town Square itself, having development that supports the health and the economic viability of that development are all important aspects to keep in mind when somebody asks us, well, what would the city be okay with going in that corridor? Because we've obviously had a lot of people who have been engaged as of recently with a couple of development proposals, we felt it was very important for us to have engagement with real residents and professionals and other stakeholders that will help us have an articulated, clear vision for what that might look like. Now, there'll be plenty of conversations and plenty of meetings about that. We could see what other cities have done and what that looks like. But from our perspective, this is the start of a conversation about letting developers and businesses know that when you come here, and by the way, when they come here with a proposal, those proposals alone cost tens of thousands of dollars. They don't show up here and just say, hey, I drew a sketch on a napkin. What do you think? I came here with $25,000 in 3D renderings, and we say, I don't know. We don't like that. Well, what do you like? Well, we'll know it when we see it, because that's kind of been the default position of Dardenne Prairie for some time. And usually the answer is still no. We want to tell them affirmatively, these are the kinds of things we want to see. Bring us this. This is what it should look like. This is what it should feel like. And then you actually might get somebody to say yes to a development. You'll be happy. The city will be happy. We'll be able to move forward. The community will feel like they're included, and they should be. And then we'll be on a better path for our long-term, again, financial and economic viability for the community as well. So that's how we got here. I will send out to you between now and the next meeting all of that information. I do want to apologize. We threw this meeting together quickly because we wanted your input on the facilitation services. But there is a lot of background information that I will send out to you between now and the next meeting. So you'll be able to read the staff report that kind of led to this. We'll give you some background history, and that'll hopefully help you in your deliberations and in the conversation going forward. But probably most importantly really is having someone help facilitate that discussion. So before we get to that, I would like to ask if there are, we can have someone be the ringleader of the circus. It won't be a circus. We'll have this will be a very, I think, easy thing. My job will be to help whoever is the chairperson of the committee. I don't think anybody should be concerned or fearful of what that looks like, but it would be good to have somebody, and I'll take volunteers and we can elect somebody unless it's by acclamation, someone who will actually run the committee. Now it sounds scary, but I'll help them along. We'll have motions. This is a committee of the city, so we will be we'll be keeping minutes. You don't have to worry about, I don't know how to do that. We'll walk you through that. But because this is a committee of the city, because we operate under state statutes and the ordinances of the city of Dardenne Prairie, we do have to follow that sort of basic structure. So is there anybody who would like to? Carl. By the way, I said introductions a minute ago. Let's have everybody introduce themselves very briefly. Just let's go around the room so we could say just a quick minute or so about yourself. So we actually know who we're all talking to from that perspective. So
Okay,
Mark?
I'll lead off. Yeah, I'm Mark Hunter. I live in Ward 1 in the Pinnacle Point subdivision. Was interested in this committee. It's pretty much aligned with what I do. I'm a kind of a career project manager and engineer. So used to working with diverse groups on pulling together a vision and then doing something with that vision.
I'm EJ Sansone. I recently completed a 2-year term on the Board of Aldermen here in Garden Prairie, so I have that background to bring to the table. In addition to that, I'm in commercial real estate as a broker, developer, and builder. So I bring that to the table as well.
Mike?
Mike Oslo, I'm Alderman representing Ward 2. I've been that for a couple years now. Day job. IT and you. Have a little bit of a background in construction, but last few years. Jacksonville, Florida, found my way up here on a 1-year contract, met a girl that hadn't been able.
My name's John Ledoux. I am the Assistant Fire Chief for Wentzville Fire. And for those of you who don't know, you are in Wentzville Fire, probably 80–90% of the city is within there. I had interest on coming onto this board, basically from a public safety standpoint. I deal with all the cities, I would cover Wentzville, Fallon, Lake St. Louis, Garden Prairie. So I spend a lot of time in a lot of meetings like this. And I hope to bring some different perspective, hopefully that can help us grow this city.
All right, I'm David Hosking, retired engineer, land surveyor, and a GIS specialist, but I'm really grateful to be retired. I live in Ward 2, and I was asked if I would like to participate, and I said, sure. I've been in this community for 23 years. So I've watched a lot of growth, So I'd like to see it continue in a good direction. I can.
Awesome. Thank you.
Carl Moss, and I live in Ward 1 in Cordova. I've been a resident there for 4 years. Prior to that, I've lived in St. Charles County for 1984. I've served on national boards, 10 years as and Heritage as the Residents Association, 7 of those years as president. My interest in seeing that the resources that we have within our borders are used to their highest and best use.
My name is Mike Woldridge, and I've been a resident of St. Charles County since 1976. The last 7 years have been here in Garden Prairie. I also sit on the Planning and Zoning Commission. I spent 43 years with the city of Ladue, retiring once as a police lieutenant after 28 years, and then spent 15 years, I guess, as an administrator on the civilian side. Part of my duties were heavily involved in planning and zoning for the city.
Cliff?
My name is Cliff Branch. Retired accountant, worked for Monsanto for 23 years. Been out in Garden Prairie for 20 years, 25th month. And I've watched it grow. I want to be a part of the growth.
I'm Debbie Haley. I'm a commercial real estate broker. I've lived in Garden Prairie for 22 years. Lived in St. Charles County my whole life, except for a few years when I lived in. And I've been involved in planning and zoning, facilities installation, stormwater, development, grading, residential developments, commercial developments. But I continue
I'm Wendy Ragavan. I'm Vice President of Marketing and Communications with the St. Charles Regional Chamber. And I've been a resident of Darting Prairie for 22 years, 21 over in Aberdeen, and the last 8 months or so in Inverness.
I'm Jack Valentine. I've lived in Dardine Prairie for 2 years now. Previous to that, I've lived in Valparaiso, Indiana. Valparaiso went through, it was a town in transition when we moved there 25 years ago. And I became a reporter for the city council on the local radio station and had to delve into city budgets, planning, building codes, just an interesting experience. They did a lot of planning and rebuilt that city. Many of the towns around it ended up boarded up. They became a vibrant small town, 33,000 people.
Well, thank you very much.
I had one thing. I just
Sure.
realized some of you are sitting in front of a small white box underneath this counter with a button on it. That is a panic button. Don't get curious and press it. Just about every alderman who comes in here that once. So if you see an officer running here, someone accidentally pressed the button. Sorry.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, Mike. Now, if you get fidgety and you're feeling under the desk, don't feel for that. So, but thank you again. And I think as we've seen here, everybody's bringing some interesting backgrounds and experiences to the table. I think that's what we were aspiring to. That's certainly what I envisioned when I originally wrote my staff memo. Was let's get a good cross section of the community. We obviously want to bring a lot of different viewpoints. One of the things that I mentioned during a previous meeting was we're looking for a diverse set of perspectives. We're not looking for necessarily a diverse view of opinions, because we'd like you to be here with a perspective, but not necessarily an opinion yet. This is going to be a process where we'd like you to take your perspectives, your history, your background, your love of this community, and take that, and with the information that will be provided, with the process that we'll go through, that hopefully that will you'll bring that to focusing on an opinion on something. Right now, we're not even sure what the opinion's on, right? We don't know. We know it's going to be about development broadly in that that triangle, but your perspectives and your backgrounds are going to be key. And I think we've got a great cross section here. I've been in local government for 20 years. Next week will be my just 2-year anniversary here in Dardenne Prairie, but been very, it's been a blessing to be here. It's a great community. Really do enjoy it. I'm originally from North St. Louis County. Everybody I meet in Dardenne Prairie, half the people are from North County originally when you meet them in St. Charles County anyway. I meet a lot of my old residents from North County out here at the HOA meetings. And so it's a wonderful community, and I'd really like to see this be the key to helping finish a vision, which we'll talk about later, kind of started almost 20 years ago in this committee. What do we do with this area here, right? There's been a lot of conversation. There's been a lot of money spent. There's been a lot of things over the last years, and it didn't pan out. But what are we going to do over the next 10 to 15 years to make something pan out there? And it's going to be commercially or whatever, commercial or residential, whatever is going to be viable. It's not going to be like the old plan, which was not viable. And it's going to, serve the best interest of our residents. So with that, I did have a nomination, or a nomination on the floor for Carl. Carl had volunteered to chair the committee. Is there any other members who would like to sit in that position? I don't blame you. I've chaired many committees. Don't Google me. Yeah. Okay. I was going to say, with that, we'll close nominations. All those in favor of Carl sitting in the big chair, please say aye. Those opposed? All right. And I will say this, I do know Carl from just knowing his background has been in similar roles before, so I know Carl will do an excellent job on that. I appreciate you stepping up. With that, though, I will ask Andy Struckoff from PGAV to come up to the podium. I'm going to I'll hand you my my microphone. He's going to go through the scope of work and the proposal that he brought to the city Board of Aldermen meeting last week. Again, the hope was to have some sort of facilitation help and or consulting services to both assist you, but then provide you technical support and information going forward so that you can, again, make the most out of this process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andy.
Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone. Nice to meet you all. Since you've all introduced and said a little something about yourselves, I'll introduce myself. My name is Andy Struckoff. I'm a president of PGAV Planners. Lifelong St. Louisan, with the exception of a brief stint in South Bend, Indiana, where I worked in multifamily development and acquisitions for a brief period of time. The graduate degree from St. Louis University in urban planning and real estate development. Worked for the city of St. Louis for a period of time in economic development and have been with PGAV for the past nearly 16 years. And a little bit about PGAV and who we are as a company. So PGAV has three parts. There's PGAV, which is the group I lead, and we focus on urban planning and economic development. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. PGAV Destinations, and if you've been to the St. Louis Zoo and you've gone to Sea Lion Sound, or if you've been to the St. Louis Aquarium at Union Station, you've seen some of our work. We design theme parks and tourism destinations across the world. We also have PGAV Architects based in Kansas City, Missouri, and they do a lot of work with universities and municipalities in Kansas and Missouri and Oklahoma. PGAV Planners, as James mentioned, we've been a planning partner and consultant to the city of Darting Prairie for a number of years now, assisting with updates to the comprehensive plan, updates with zoning issues, market analyses, and things like that. As a firm, we've been in business for more than 50 years, helping communities address situations exactly like this that we're here to talk about this evening. Our bias in planning is really toward action. If we aren't producing for our clients a plan that is actionable and achievable, we feel like we're not doing our job. So that means that when we produce a plan, we really think hard about it. We really engage the community with some intention and some information. We don't like to just go flatly into community and just ask them broadly, questions about what they want to see. We want to have some informed conversations. So when we have engagement, we talk about here's where the market is at these days. Here are some challenges. Here are some things that you need to think about as you help us think about how to address this situation. And so over the course of even the past 15 years, we've been a part of real estate development, in excess of $3 billion across the country. And that's across all different real estate asset classes. And so what we're going to talk through about this evening is our approach to this process, and kind of our goals and objectives as we go through it. So the overarching goal, as James described this as well, is we understand what's possible in the triangle, Town Square Avenue and Highway 6440 and Post Road. Okay. Understanding that the city wants a better understanding of land use options, impact on built environment, revenue, traffic circulations, and things like that within that area. So we'll walk through in this presentation a proposed scope of services. This slide presents a summary of kind of how we would go through it, with steering committee meetings kind of scheduled according to milestones in the process. So the cadence of the meetings is really according to milestones. If during the course of the process we decide we need an extra meeting or something in between a task, or as we're working on a task, we can certainly do that. But that's why we have the meetings scheduled or laid out the way that they are, with 2 public workshops as well, so we can go out into the public and ask them for their input. Okay, so the first step is really getting started, getting data in front of us, understanding land use, zoning, understanding property information, development history, much of this information we already have through virtue of our past work with the city. But really want to talk through that with city staff, make sure we have a clear picture and clear understanding before we get started. This image shows deliverables from similar work we did with the city of O'Fallon, Missouri. We recently worked on their new comprehensive plan, and these maps just show land uses and zoning and development challenges and things like that, which we talk about in the early stages of the process. The engagement process I laid out, 4 steering committee meetings where we would, first kick off the process with you all. And at the kickoff meeting, we would come to you with some market analysis, some market data, and start to have a conversation around what's possible for this area. And the 2 public meetings, the first public meeting, we'd engage the public with some information about our market observations, development challenges, opportunities, and ask the public for what they would like to see. And this is an example of how we would conduct a public workshop. We'd have maps and images, boards, poster boards, things for people to interact with as they come and visit, so they can leave with us some notes, some thoughts, and some ideas, and we can take them back to the office and work them into the data that we have in front of us and summarize them, and we come back to you for the next steering committee meeting and talk to you about what we heard from people in Darting Prairie. And then we start to put together scenario modeling and visualization. James mentioned at the outset that developers, they're always looking for opportunity, and they have to spend some money before they get involved in a project. What the scenario modeling and visualization process helps you all do and helps the city do is paint a pretty clear picture and tell a pretty clear story about what the city would like to see, what the city would support from a regulatory perspective with respect to development. You can say, John or Jane Doe developer, here's a project we would like to see. Here's what it would look like. Come partner with us and build it, and let's make it happen. So what we would do is we would show potential land uses and development patterns. We would lay this out in a 3D scenario. So we help make it easier for people to understand and see potential they can see in 3 dimensions. When people come into this process, especially people from the public, they'll have questions. They'll want to know, what's it going to look like? How's it going to impact traffic? How's it going to impact my property? And if they can see it in 3D, in context, then we can help them answer those questions. So these maps here are going to show some land use layouts and alternatives for a project we are working on currently in Perryville, Missouri. And this is like a 2D representation of some of the work we would provide as we work our way into the 3D modeling process. And then the 3D models start to look like this. So this is a mixed use concept. You can see the concept is sort of sketched out with more detail than the sugar cubes around it, which would be existing buildings. And we can, produce different scales, produce this at different scales and from different angles so people can see it in context and understand how it fits into the built environment. And also including roadways to see how pedestrians and traffic can fit in as well. So the final deliverable would include all these 3D illustrations and maps in a 3D interactive format, and the renderings, as well as all the quantitative impacts that go along with it. What are the impacts on parking, traffic circulation, tax revenue to the city, any service costs, and population. For example, we're talking about residential units, what would that mean? So that way the city would have in front of them, according to this path, if it is chosen and the developer builds it, here are the impacts, here's any cost of services, here's any revenues that may be generated by this particular scenario. So you can make an informed decision about the path forward. This example is from a master plan we recently completed for UMSL. They have decided to reorient their campus and open up 35 acres south of Natural Bridge for development. So we spent about a year working through a scenario planning process and came up with this master plan for them, which is relatively more dense, transit oriented. There's a Metrolink stop on the east side and pretty residential heavy. All right. Yep, and there you go. And then that's this image shows the phasing. So this would be a project built over 4 phases over a couple decades. It'd be a long-term process. And this is in Richmond Heights, where Richmond Heights is adopting their comprehensive plan this evening. And we worked through a few different scenarios for a few different locations in the city of Richmond Heights. This image you're looking at is the, if you're at the Galleria and you're at the southern end, right at Highway 40, like a big chunk of parking lot that never gets used. Richmond Heights wanted to know, like, what could that be? If it could be better. So we went through a few different scenarios, and each one included some park space, using that green space sort of in that elbow there, that the southwest part of that lot. And each one of these, we gave them a summary of economic impacts, fiscal impacts to the city, and in the case of it's residential or office impacts with respects to employment or new residents. We propose to do this work over a period of 4 to 6 months for a total fee of $65,500. And I'll open up for any questions you have.
Yes, my first question would be if it goes over, for whatever reason, it goes over the 6 months. The scope is 4 to 6 months. If it goes over the 6 months, is there an additional fees that you tack on for, or is this based on this project?
No, I think we'd have to try really hard to make it go over 6 months. I think that given the process we've kind of laid out and the ground we're looking at, I feel like we could really get it done in 4 months. So I think 6 months is the long end for it. Of course, if we go super long, I mean, the fee quoted is the fee quoted for the work. So I don't foresee any change there, but if there needs to be, we'll talk with James about it.
And are there any other fees that aren't added in there? Like that,
There may be some minor reimbursable expenses, maybe printing and things like that, but nothing material.
Just another thing I didn't mention to be outside of this, board's original resolution that set this body up actually starts the timer today. Charge from the board is for 6 months from the date of the, so, I mean, the board could always extend that, but essentially mission expires in 6 months as a board of the city.
Line of communication between the committee and yourselves, is it direct or does it go through other channels as far as the persons such as James or council members? How do we, I mean, we have council member on with us, but is there a direct communication or does it go through another track?
Well, I will tell you this. I mean, we want this group to be autonomous from the Board of Aldermen. Obviously, as a staff person of the city, I mean, I'm a resource for you. You're asking, can you talk to them directly? We don't have an issue with that. I think purposes of communication and collaboration, we all should recognize that we want all those communications to, whether you're copying each other or, and this is also a board that's governed by the Sunshine Law, so I do have to keep documentation of communications, et cetera. So you would need to at least try to keep me in the loop on that. But yeah, ultimately, you guys would be free to interact with and provide guidance to the DAB, or your facilitator, for how you want to move forward or what your input is.
And we would work with you and with James to schedule the meetings. And we'd try to set up a shared drive to share information so that you can get in and look at our draft documents and any notes we have from any stakeholder meetings or public workshops would be there for your review as well in advance of any meetings that we have.
We'll figure out if it's Google Drive or Basecamp or OnBase, SharePoint. You'll have a repository for all this information That way we'll, everybody will have access to all the data, both the raw data and finished products as they do. And then you would be, of course, free to share that with others. If you, as a member of this committee, would like to have, additional input from your neighbors, some of you are on HOAs, some of you are presidents of HOAs, or those of you who work with businesses, from the chamber, want to get their thoughts and input to help stimulate additional questions or conversation. Because ultimately, we want this to be, we want to have an effective product here. I mean, there's, just to give you a little bit of background, I think we spent over $500,000 on the failed plan that this will essentially replace. So that was 20 years ago. So think about inflation, like a $750,000 plan. You guys are gonna have a lot on your shoulders to replace that with $65,000. But PGAV is, I've worked with them in previous communities doing this exact same thing. I can tell you that they have their process down to science. They obviously know, they know the area, they know our community. That's why we went to them first. So there's less lead time, there's less familiarization with not just the community as it stands, but they also familiar with the history. So, but yeah, we would want you to share that out. We would want to get as much input as possible and information out.
What sort of background information might we receive? Enlighten us, me?
I mean, sure. I mean, there's the information I can give you just city has, whether it's shopping trends. I mean, I can tell you right now, everybody who shops at Schnucks in Garden Prairie, where they were before they went to Schnucks, where they were after. So we have metadata on your cell phones, not you specifically. I don't know where Carl went. Nobody calls me, then I know where he's at, but but we have metadata that tracks cell phones. So we know who shopping where they go before and after. We know those are the kinds of things that help us. We go, man, who's shopping in Garden Prairie? Why are they going to Garden Prairie? Well, because they go to Schnucks right after they drop off their kids at ICD, or they seem to come here a lot after they go to Walmart in Lake St. Louis. I guess they don't get what they want there. They come to Schnucks here. I mean, there's a lot of data like that, and that's just on the economic data, but we'll talk about real estate data. There's going to be plenty of data, raw data that you'll get. Then Andy can not only provide you data about our community, but also reference information I get from other communities, so we can know as a comparative model what's similar to us, what may work in other communities, doesn't work in other communities, what developers will build and what they won't build. I think that was kind of ignored from the last project. They had this great plan that they wanted to build, which looked very pretty amazing. If you ever want to see that, I'll share that with you too. In fact, I'll make it a point to share that plan with you because it's this thick. It's amazing. But even after they finished it, the development community said, "Oh, we're not building that in your town." So it's got to be economically viable. So that's the sort of stuff they'll be able to provide to you too.
Is there a map of the available land we're talking about for this project, or has a determined amount of land been already designated? For what the city areas that we're gonna build?
That's the kind of information we'll give you, parcel information. There's a lot of it that's for sale currently. I can give you the listings for that so you can see what people are asking per square foot now. So all of that information, again, on a raw data level, we'll provide all that information to you. So that'll help with the context of what's available, what's not, what people are selling it for. There's some property, quite frankly, the city is considering condemnation on, or I should say, in conversations internally about. Carl mentioned highest and best use. There's properties in this community that are not the highest and best use. Some of which are unfortunately dilapidated. So how do we get those to be redeveloped, and if not, at least cleaned up the blight? to lighten their community, especially. Those will all be provided to you as well for context.
It's going to be a comprehensive undertaking in that it's residential, commercial, point of destination. One place that comes to my mind, I've been watching for years now, is Cockleville. How far they've come in a very short time, turned that into a very family-oriented, full dining. It's a place where people go. That's something that is of here.
Well, like I said, this is not a, we're coming at this not with predisposition towards uses. We have a defined area. Ultimately, you will define what we want to see in that geographic area. That may be commercial, maybe residential, maybe a mix of both, depending on what parcels we're talking about. If you look at our map here, you'll see Town Square, Old Highway Inn, from the Prairie, right there, Bryan Inn. Your charge is to help develop a plan for development along that corridor down to Mers Farm, which is this area. It's empty across from Target and Schnucks. Then down Technology to Post Road, where's our city limits are, and then back up Post. So kind of a lane sideways forward. But essentially this triangle, this area. City comprehensive plan does already envision broader uses. There's obviously zoning that already exists there. Your charge will be in part, does that zoning fit? Is there greater detail we can give to the comprehensive plan by letting developers know maybe that the next confine of the comprehensive plan, this is what we're talking about? Or do you recommend something radically different? The zoning there is kind of a mess because it's, it's been changed. It still has the leftover remnants of, they call the uptown zoning, which was that original plan from 20 years ago. So this zoning, even though we massively rezoned that whole area, it's not specific. It's very broad, even the zoning code. So when people ask me like, well, it says here, it could be R1, R2, or R1A, R1B, R1C, R1D, or C1 or C2. I'm like, that's true. Our zoning in that corridor actually says it could be any of those. Then they have to come to the city, come up with a site. Too broad. Developers don't even want to touch that. Not really telling me what you want. I really don't know what we want. We'll know when we see it.
Andy, let me ask you a question. On your proposal here under scope of services, it talks about creating 2 development scenarios for 2 focus sites, Mers Farm area and Town Square and Post intersection. My first question is, who determined those 2 for the scenarios?
I think we determined those, for the purposes of the draft scope of services, an internal conversation with James about what we're going to look at, understanding the Mers Farm property being the property at Mers Farm and Town Square, and then going down Mers Farm or Technology Drive along 64.
Just so we're clear, and you might, I'm sure you might not be aware of this, but we've had significant development interest in those areas, including the area of Mers Farm Lane, which is owned by St. Louis Bank, or closed many years ago. So it's never gotten to P&Z, that farm.
Right.
But we've had a lot of conversations about what owners of that property wants to do something. We can't articulate something that we feel confident that P&Z makes. So again, that's part of the nexus for this. That is one of the biggest redevelopment sites in the city, and it's being actively pursued.
Right.
And then city, those who don't know, this property right here, this 10 acres on the southwest quadrant of Town Square and Post is the city's property. day I got here, the city's like, let's do something with that. I go, what? They go, oh, sell it, build something on it. Well, they have a plan, because that really would be the catalyst for potential development, all that open area corridor. What would that look like?
The reason for my question is I don't want us to ignore technology. I mean, there's a lot of property along there that it's a lot of eyes looking at it. And it looks pretty pathetic in terms of what's there now for the most part. And I don't want us to exclude that area for the sake of these two. And I think we have to look at it as a whole to move ahead with it. The other thing that I would like to add here is that, correct me if I'm wrong, James, whatever this group comes together with in terms of some sort of vision, the purpose is to be able to incorporate it into the comprehensive plan. Because a couple of years ago, when we adopted the plan, then they came back, or PGAV came back with some suggested changes from, I believe, a previous administration. And it didn't get much traction, and it had to do with the development of future land use. So whatever happens here goes to planning and zoning to look at it, to be incorporated into a comprehensive plan. And at the same time, the comprehensive plan is not a necessarily, you have to follow this, it's a guideline. So there's budget space, so to speak, as to what goes into these areas, just so that you.
And did you work with Lake St. Louis on theirs?
On their zoning?
Plan?
No.
So to Mike's point though, and I'll send that out to everybody too. We'll get that drive set up. One of the proposals, or one of the examples I gave, which was how Lake St. Louis's comp plan shows the broad comp plan from the city, but they have an appendix or an addendum, if you will, that shows ironically what they're calling uptown, which is like the north shore of the lake, the redevelopment they're trying to do there. And so they have a Lake St. Louis broad zoning map, comp plan. They have a very specific, very detailed 3D graphic rendering of how they would like to redevelop the north shore of the lake. So that's the level of detail we're drilling down to on this corridor, and that's kind of where we're at. This isn't meant to necessarily supplant or replace the comp plan. It is meant to hopefully get the buy-in of the community or the Planning and Zoning Commission, and would be a important addendum or appendix to the comp plan that we adopted. Well,
Do the current landowners, are they aware of process?
yes. And in fact, everything on technology, to Mike's point, and technology is by no means forgotten about it. I think it's there's a lot of conversation on that. Thomas Realty Group represents most of the 25 acres of landowners on that site. But yeah, they're all very well aware of this. I mean, those are almost all of that's for sale or has development proposals forthcoming. So they're all very interested and they're engaged in this as well. Town Square is only, that's the property over here by Wyndham Meadows did just recently sell, but there's a few properties there's a lot of open land. It's not all necessarily for sale. I don't know that it'll be sale, some that'll be for sale for a while. But certainly we'll want to engage those residents. But there's a lot of adjacent parcel owners who are engaged, and they again want to develop. This is why it's so important for us. They are ready to sell, they're ready to build. Maybe some of their neighbors aren't, but such as development, unfortunately. But they do need direction.
Do we know what O'Fallon is doing with Caledonia and their? Aren't they doing a stretch along Highway 40 that will
So-
be retailed?
Yeah, there'll be some retail in that project. Yeah.
SSM.
Right, I thought they were gonna have some walking. Tropical.
Yeah, my understanding is there's some kind of neighborhood scale retail kind of oriented for the houses and that for the residential that they're building in that area.
James, do you have any updates on road improvement projects in this area? I know the Post Road was a road improvement project that was slated. And then, there's been ongoing conversation about possibly slip ramp off of Highway 40 in this area on technology. So I think it would be helpful for everybody if we just kind of understood the road improvement projects as well.
Sure. Well, and we'll make sure that I'll make sure that I, front load you guys with that information and narrative to go along with that. We'll try to make sure we're respectful of your meeting times, but we'll also make sure we give you plenty of homework in between. That way, have these meetings be effective. But to EJ's point, right here on the Post and Technology, we do have a grant that's going to be turned 90-degree there so that we can have a much safer egress onto technology from Post. There's a multiple phase plan for redeveloping Post, which is just really a road improvement. That does include some pedestrian improvements as well. And so to EJ's point, I think he might be getting at all of how we decide this area will eventually develop. While surface road improvements may be not that important, we start talking about pedestrian improvements, when we start talking about, Pottleville was mentioned, other modes of transportation like facilitating golf carts or other kind of low impact vehicles. Incorporating that into this vision is very important. But yeah, we do have some road improvement projects going on both on Post, resurfacing kind of in here or Town Square. But we're not doing any additional like multimodal transportation improvements along that corridor. If that corridor was to be redeveloped, hopefully, once we give them guidance, they probably will. We would probably work with the developer then to fund and then dedicate those to the city. Whether that's counties going up to 15-foot walking trails. Their counties now saying they want their bike walking trails all to be golf cart friendly. But that's the sort of thing we could do, right? You could build a nice golf cart path along Town Square so people golf cart, pub and grub. Doesn't mean you're still not allowed to drive drunk on a golf cart, FYI. That doesn't save you from a DWI, but you want to go to Town Square Pub and Grub or Target or Qdoba on a golf court, that might be something that this committee comes up and says, hey, when that property develops on the south side of Town Square, we want a multimodal transportation improvement. Work with the developer to do that. Of course, we'd also tell them it would all be part of the, hopefully, the finished product.
Yeah, one. As a board, we talked about the vision, things like that, and in our conversations, it was said that we don't want this just to be here's a land use there at the end. That's part of what that is land use, but not exclusively, because the other part of this is understanding more about what Garden Prairie is. We talked about this for years about trying to get a grasp on what Garden Prairie is, culture, what expectations are of residents, of what our values are, things like that. Because that typically goes a long way to form attracting developers. As far as that goes, when I saw the layout of the meetings, I had concerns about whether we would really be able to get enough information. That cadence direction. What would your opinion be about stepping outside of City Hall walls, not just saying, hey, we're gonna have a public meeting, come in, only those people who are prone to coming to the meeting, or with surveys and things like that? Have you guys used that before to any effect?
Yeah, we've built websites for projects and created public facing surveys. And would be happy to do that in this instance as well, if you think it would be beneficial. And that question is helpful for us because we can make sure that when we're talking with the public, we can ask them those kinds of questions. Which I think would be really good to get into with people. So we'd be happy to do a survey and to build a website to go along with this, if you would like us to.
That's, I know that my person will be very transparent. That's something that I'm really excited about. That's something that added into this.
Yeah, we can do that. And we've gotten a lot out of that. Like it's always nice. It's nice as well when you're in a public workshop setting or an engagement setting where you can hand someone a card and say, go to this website for more information. Here's a QR code and here's where you can find it. So
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, with the technology available, kind of crazy not to be able to do some kind of online survey or accumulation of public comments. It seems like that would be pretty straightforward and easy to do. I did have one question. You know, we refer to previous studies. I mean, has there been a sort of a real clear understanding and like how it ties into your quote and deliverables on like what went wrong with previous studies? I mean, you know, Darden Prairie's been around for a while and then, you know, we're here, you know, trying to invent ourselves again is, I mean, I don't know, I'm not sure who that's a question for, but, I mean, as you put,
Administrations.
yeah, as you put together your quote, I mean, was it done with a little bit of that in mind? It's like, yeah, we've been here before and, you know, how's this going to be different?
yeah, I mean, that's a good question. And, we've talked with people about that plan from 2007 that you all spent all that money on and never went anywhere. And we see plans like that in other communities from time to time. And as a professional planner, it drives me insane to see that sort of thing because at the end of the day, it's a waste of time and money. I hope that at the time it was a helpful design exercise, but I think it comes down to a difference in philosophy uh, for planners. I think get on my soapbox here for a second. Some urban planners approach any situation as design as the solution, right? And just throw a design at you and say, there, I fixed it. It's beautiful. Build it. And then they walk away. You never hear from them or see them ever again. We don't like to do that because it's not that simple. It never is because somebody's got to build it, right? Like somebody's got to pay for it. Somebody's got to figure out how to finance it. And that's what we think about as we're going through this stuff. So when we give you a plan at the end of the day, it's going to make sense with respect to Darden Prairie, like where you are in the world and where you are in the market. Makes sense with respect to the market as it is today. Like we're not going to tell you to build 500,000 square feet of office space because nobody's going to do that these days, right? But we're going to talk about what makes sense and what works well for Darden Prairie and the residents, their identity, and what they want to see, because we're going to talk to them too. And we're going to talk to the city about, when it's on city land, or we're talking about amenities and transportation connections and things like that, how much that costs and what does that look like. So at the end of the day, you got a roadmap forward. You can see the costs, you can see the impacts, you can see a way forward to engage a development partner in a productive conversation about how to build what it is that you want to see.
Andy, I have a comment, I guess, comment. Last few folks that spoke up are talking about, Wendy talked about what O'Fallon's doing. EJ talked about what's going on with the road improvements. And then comprehensive plan or who is Darden Prairie, what do you take into consideration, like how did Cottleville get to be successful? What did they do? What sort of process did they have? You have already been working with O'Fallon. What did that look like? Was it more comprehensive for the entire area, or did you concentrate on just one section? Because it all goes together in commercial and residential development. it does all go together. So like, where are all the holes in Garden Prairie? What's going to be developed someday and what should, and how can it all go together?
Yeah.
According to what the residents are looking for and how we fit into the town.
Oh, great point, great question. You know, I think what we'll do is we'll write up some summary about what's been going on in other parts of St. Charles County. And, you know, because when we worked in O'Fallon, we looked at all the city of O'Fallon, and we also looked at territory around the city of O'Fallon. So we could talk to the community about what's happening in this part of St. Charles County, and I think we should do the same here. So we're talking about these development opportunities. So we're not going to just talk about them as islands. We're going to talk to them about how they relate to parts of Darting Prairie around them. And we're going to talk about Darting Prairie and how it relates to St. Charles County around it. So we'll write up some summary about what's going on, you know, what O'Fallon's been doing and what Cottleville's been doing, and any other developments of interest that I can't think of right now, but probably think of when we sit down to put that together. That's a good point.
Any information about the history of Darden Prairie? I've lived here a long time. I don't know why it's called Darden Prairie other than Darden Creek. I have really no idea why it's called Darden Prairie. In the history, it's a good way to go forward.
Well, one of our staff members, we call him the Godfather, they founded the village on his like living room table. Make sure when you have a couple hours to spare, we'll have Jeff tell you. But we do luckily have, there's a number of resources, and there's residents in town that kind of are the repository of unofficial city historian. But again, what I would suggest, and what we'll do is we'll get an email chain together. And I would encourage all of you for any kind of information requests and things like this, especially offline, you know, we don't have to be in a meeting for that. Make those requests. We'll get that information. We'll put it in that central repository, Google Drive or SharePoint, Basecamp, whatever we end up setting up. And then from there, you know, you'll be able to have your nightly readings. But then, of course, obviously, if there's conversations that come from the data, the information we get you, if there's additional engagement or questions, you know, that can instruct us as to the kind of people we might need to bring forward for you to talk to, whether it's a developer. Caution you talking to Jeff. I love the man, but he could give you a 3-hour dissertation on Darden Prairie. Surprised he's not here, actually. He's at every meeting. So we'll make sure that we get that for you.
This is the assumption with it. Like wanting to kick the work off tonight is that those fundamental directional things are established enough, or is that kind of part of the scope to get this thing rolling? That it's like, as Mike brought up, like, let's take a little bit here and really answer that "who are we" question, or in your mind to launch this purchase order. Is that this mission is to look at this triangle and kind of figure out what's going to work. And you don't have to go all the way back to square one in order to do that.
Yeah, I think that's the mission here this evening, is to get started working on that triangle, and we can adjust our scope to reflect the website and start moving.
Last meeting, quite a discussion about this perspective. Mission right here, we take a look at charge given and ask PGAV or go with somebody else or do something else. Discuss that here. Relative consensus to say, here's what we think. Here's what have as a instead of having the city say, hey, commission, here's what you're going to do, and here's the resources that you're going to get better like it. So I think a good conversation. Right? So.
A little bit to the detail. We got to why they're here, referencing that them or somebody else.
Yeah, so I will never shoehorn any place, but I'll speak for myself. PGAV has been with the city for a long time, a lot of work already, and a bunch of different projects are always helping with comprehensive that. They are uniquely bunch of background data, a bunch of work product that's already. So you could go to another planner, I think. With another, right. But I haven't heard anyone.
So your city staff has already signed off on it.
I have never heard anyone say anything bad, so, haven't heard anyone say.
And I've worked with their team before, again, here, comp plan, on comp plan updates and revisions, and then in other communities where we've done, a similar sort of vision for what was our downtown. So their process is tried and true. They're great at engaging residents. You as the steering committee will help guide them. I think that there's, while the group is certainly going to be the ones asking the questions and asking for information and data, and then eventually giving the kind of final feedback, they're very good in the engagement. They're very good on keeping the process moving. They're very good at making the best out of your time. And so I think what's most important for us before we actually get to doing work, not that we're obviously doing work here, but while we're actually moving forward, is to have that facilitation and consulting, that person or that group that we can reach out to and say, we've got a lot of great questions tonight. We've got a lot of great notes here, but there's gonna be a lot of homework for not just myself, but for the consultant, whoever that is, to do. I think that they would be both for the price quoted, but then also for their history and background, that they would be able to help us moving forward. As I mentioned, we do have a 6-month time limit, so to speak, on this. We would like to get it moving as quickly as possible, in part because we do have so many developers who are really just not just developers, but even the real estate folks who are listing property in our community. We're saying, like, some direction, give me some direction. For me, we need that direction from our community so that we can tell them what we want. Yes.
You mentioned, or we've been talking about the plan that didn't go forward, the old plan. Is there, on your scope of work, is there some milestones that would be accountable for? When I'm doing a development, I have some milestones that people have to meet. If they don't meet that, I can terminate the contract. Have anything like that?
We don't currently have anything like that explicitly in the contract. We typically don't have those in our services contracts. We typically do produce our schedules. We will hit, by a certain date, we'll have this deliverable, we'll have this meeting, and move forward that way.
I will say, just from my experience, and maybe I just want to say this about working with citizen boards, but I mean, to some extent, it's going to be, they're going to do their work, but then we're going to have to come back to you and ask for input. They're going to do their work, and then they're going to ask for input. And so some of those milestones are going to be based on whether or not they hit the mark, or whether or not you change your mind, or you like it or you don't like it. Sometimes a committee meets and says, hey, this is what we think. And then they put it in a 3D model and they're like, oh God, I don't want that. So now it's going back, and then we'll take another stab at this. So, as you mentioned, the price is more or less the price, but I mean, the process, I think, tends to be fluid based on what the community ends up asking for.
Yeah, it can be a little bit fluid. That being said, we've never had a consulting contract such as this where we haven't delivered what we said we would deliver.
Well, the reality of it is that you may not be fully driving the bus for this process anyway. So it would be difficult to set out a milestone and you don't control.
Well, the citizens are driving the bus. That's absolutely.
Yeah, Mike, I was going to make a motion in light of the history of AV, past so its knowledge, what it can bring as far as information that we don't have to have someone go out. That we consider the bid that's been brought before the board consideration and now our consideration. Take that motion.
Since you're the chair, how about you go
I know.
ahead? Well, I was gonna say, how about you ask for that? You've stated the motion, so then we'll ask someone to make that.
I'll move for clarity.
Yeah.
As clarity, are you talking about, asking the board to accept as written?
I mean, that's what I'm asking for first. I think we received it from Mike, isn't it? We have a second, first and a second, for any further discussion.
And if, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Andy, just so we're clear, because I know there was some conversation about additional online. So are we looking at scope wise, are we looking at obviously we're looking at a little bit of scope, but what are we looking at as far as service costs? I wouldn't put you on the spot for a number here. We're talking about a significant difference.
No, the difference will be pretty minor in cost, if there's any difference at all, to add the website and the survey to the scope. Yeah,
Okay.
but we'll make that change and get that back to you tomorrow. And sorry?
Same. Come on, you guys don't.
He's like, my staff's gonna kill me if I say this.
No, I
Tell John.
yeah, I think we can do it for the same contract cost. That'll be fine.
Not to pile on too. They explicitly.
Absolutely,
Press east.
totally. Let's do it.
Any other further discussion? All those in favor, signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed by the same sign? Passes.
I think no other real items on our agenda, other than adjournment. Obviously, I will start, just for your understanding and knowledge, I will start a email listserv so that everybody can communicate through that. We'll also start here in the next week or so a repository for the information that have already been kind of requested. And then September 6th meeting, I'll have an ordinance, I'll draw up an ordinance to approve the facilitation services, but I know Andy and I, working in good faith, will start the process now of talking about getting together a calendar for meetings and stuff together. And then did everybody feel pretty comfortable with the doodle poll as far as telling your availabilities? Worked out fairly well. I know it was still hard on such short notice. I think as we start giving each, ourselves weeks notice and talking about this, will be much easier to use. But as far as functionally, didn't seem like anybody struggled with it.
Yeah.
So
Are you gonna post these agendas on the website?
correct. So it is a public meeting, so we'll post the meetings.
And I didn't see this
It is.
posted out there. It wasn't posted on the website.
I'm actually looking at the one that's posted on the website.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's actually from the website.
Because it wasn't posted on Friday.
No, it wasn't, because Jen was already gone. By the time we figured out the meeting time, I had got it in time just before City Hall closed. So unfortunately, Jen was already gone, so she wasn't able to do that on Friday, but
Okay.
she did it over the weekend, so. We work on the weekends here sometimes a lot. Yes, ma'am.
If we wanted to follow along in future meetings, would we need to print off anything that's on the website or agendas, or would there be paper copies?
In the future, I'll make sure you guys have, again, we'll have the repository for information. You'll get agendas, agenda packets, everything, minutes from this meeting at the next meeting. It's up to you guys. I know the board, oftentimes likes to go digital. I'll provide everything to you in a digital format, so, but if you all would like paper copies, I mean, I'll kill a tree or two. So however you like to do it. Some of us use tablets and other things, and so we don't, but we will certainly do whatever your preference is. We'll have that available for you in the future meeting.
Meeting might be beneficial to members. Have a brief overview. Sunshine law is, what laws govern conduct here. Big above board, no.
I mean, ultimately, these are all public meetings that have to be published 24 hours in advance. Obviously, everything that we have here is being recorded and will be available if anybody ever wants to see it. And we generally make it a practice to post all of our meetings on our city YouTube page. So just be cognizant of that, you know, in any meetings. That being said, as far as any conversations outside of meetings, I don't foresee this being an issue. This regard being is that you're recommending body. But typically, you know, if more than half of the group wants to get together and, you know, meet to talk about this and do business, that would be what they would call a violation of the Sunshine Law, because quorum of the body is having a meeting outside of a published meeting. That's not to say that in the course of knowing each other or meeting each other that you guys can't have coffee and talk about things. There's no laws or policies being made here, so I mean, there's obviously concerns if there were people having meetings, even individually outside of meetings, in order to forward some specific action. But I would encourage you to just talk to each other, you know, meet each other as residents, neighbors, have coffee, talk to other people. You're quite free to do any of that, to bring that information, to bring those thoughts. You know, I don't foresee any kind of closed session meetings being held in this group, because none of the things that we would be doing would probably be an exemption of the Sunshine Law. Maybe if there was like a conversation about a specific property, we might close it off because it's a real estate matter under development or under consideration for development. But other than that, you know, these are all, we'd encourage your conversations, we'd welcome that, and we'd encourage the input that your neighbors, associates and other stakeholders outside of the meeting.
Another note, that quorum does extend to electronic communications as well. So if you are sending an email or something out to the entire board, just so she has a record of it.
And I'll set up the listserv to both have the city clerk and myself on it, so that as long as we're sticking to the listserv, you won't be running afoul of worrying about record retention, which is what the alderman's getting. Yes, ma'am.
How often will we be meeting? Every week?
Well, it's gonna be up to the group here, and it's gonna be up to obviously the schedule. We kind of get to the PGAV, I think. Once we get the engagement done, once they kind of put together their initial schedule and agenda, so to speak. So we'll have a conversation about future meetings. We can have a conversation about what we think is necessary, you know, as far as, because there's obviously going to be a meeting. There's obviously going to be both work for the consultant and myself to provide, you know, work product in between those meetings and public engagements. And obviously making sure we have enough published time to make sure that we get people to those public engagements, but we'll go over our calendars and things like that at the next meeting. But I mean, we also do have, by the way, I don't encourage this, but if necessary, we do have the ability for you to join in electronically. Obviously, that's not necessarily always the best opportunity for you to be engaged in the conversation, but they're all, you know, some of you are still working professionals. All I'm sure have families, so things come up, but we can make sure that can accommodate you.
Not during deer season.
That's why we gotta get this going. Absolutely right.
Procedurally, doesn't board still have to approve, have two hearings, first reading, second reading to approve the.
So for this,
Inspector.
for this, we do two, this could be, it actually be done as a resolution. We do things as ordinances, but either way, we'll read it and complete it at the January, or the September 6th meeting. The board did discuss that this is this is what we fall into our exemptions to the
Okay.
two-meeting rule. Because it's a contractual engagement,
Right.
most of those are already vetted for some time before. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the next meeting be 6th.
The Board of Aldermen meeting is the 6th.
Oh, okay.
That's when we'll finalize the engagement with PGAV, but Andy and I will get working tomorrow on, we'll start having conversations about schedules, calendars, getting the groundwork laid, and then as soon as I can get something out to you, as far as we talk about calendarizing a new meeting, another meeting, I'll get a poll out to you to get your schedules, and then we'll get something on the books based on that. So, and like I said, we'll give you a lot more lead time than 6 days or 5 days. Yes,
The
Jack.
previous study that you talked about, would that come to us in an email?
Which thing? I'm sorry.
The previous study that you talked about, the
Yep.
500,000.
Well, it's too big to put in an email. So we're gonna put it all in on a like a Google Drive or some sort of drive, and I'll put all that data in there. And then I'll email you the link,
Okay,
because we're limited to like 25 megabytes, and I think that thing's like a gig by itself. It's ridiculous. So it's huge. But we also have a lot of, you guys are always welcome at City Hall. We'd love to have you come by here if there's any hard copies or things that you'd like to see. Some things we might not even have electronically. We do have some hard copies of these things as well. Anything else? Carl, you can call the adjournment.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good.
Who made the motion to adjourn? Mike, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming out.
John, did you second it?
No,
Yeah,
no.
No, they're not here.
Okay.
Debbie did.
Who seconded? You
I
did.
did. Talk about it.
Sit next to you.